The auditorium murmured with the restless excitement that always filled the AGT studio moments before something unforgettable happened. The lights shimmered across thousands of expectant faces, bouncing off the metallic edges of the stage, creating that familiar electric tension, like the whole room was holding its breath for history to unfold. No one knew why today felt different. They just felt it. Then the doors at the back of the stage parted. A thin, quiet teenage boy stepped into the light, maybe 15, 16 at most. His shoulders were slightly hunched, as if he had spent years trying to take up as little space as possible. His sneakers were scuffed, the kind worn down from long walks and long days. His shirt was a size too big. In his hands, gripped tighter than anything else, was a microphone. It looked like a lifeline. The judges instinctively leaned in. Something about him made them pause. Simon Cowell raised an eyebrow. His instinct was rarely wrong. He studied the boy the way a painter studies a blank canvas, wondering what masterpiece might be hidden beneath plainness. Sofia whispered something under her breath. Heidi's expression softened. Howie sat forward, interested. The boy reached center stage, swallowed hard, and looked up at them. His eyes were deep and dark, full of something fragile and heavy. Fear, hope, pain. It was impossible to tell. When he spoke, his voice trembled. "My name is Eli Navarro," the audience offered, a polite applause, but there was a kind of quiet in the room, a sympathetic sort of curiosity. Heidi leaned closer to her mic. "How old are you, Eli?" 16, he answered softly, though it sounded like he had rehearsed it 1,000 times. Simon's tone shifted into something more serious. "Why are you here today?" Eli pressed his lips together nervously before answering. Because I've been waiting for this moment my whole life, and this is my one chance to show the world what I never got to show anyone," the audience murmured with interest. Sofia's expression tightened with emotion. Heidi smiled gently. "What will you be singing for us?" Eli lowered his gaze to his shoes before answering. "A song I wrote. It's called 5 Seconds. The judges exchanged quick glances. Songwriters were always unpredictable, but a 16-year-old with an original piece? That could go either brilliantly or terribly." Howie asked, "Why that title?" Eli swallowed. "Because sometimes that's all it takes. 5 seconds. For everything in your life to fall apart. Or for everything to finally make sense." The room shifted. Something about the way he said it carried the weight of years. Not youthful dramatics. Real, lived struggle. Simon straightened in his chair, sensing it. "Are you ready?" Eli took in a shaky breath, then nodded. "I hope so." The lights dimmed instantly, casting a soft shadow across the stage. A single beam illuminated Eli from above, turning the boy into a silhouette of nerves and determination. A soft piano note echoed through the speakers. The sound was delicate, haunting even, like the first drop of rain before a storm. Eli closed his eyes, and suddenly, his entire posture changed. His shoulders relaxed, his grip on the microphone loosened. His breathing steadied. It was as though the very second the music touched him, he stepped out of fear and into something entirely different, something powerful. Then he opened his mouth. The first note exploded into the room, powerful, raw, soaring far beyond anything anyone expected from a boy who looked like he might break if someone spoke too loudly near him. The first 5 seconds alone hit the entire auditorium like a shockwave. This wasn't just singing. This was a soul erupting. Simon's eyes widened, truly widened, the way they only did when something historic was happening. Heidi gasped. Sofia clutched her chest. Howie looked like he'd been hit with a burst of cold air. The audience froze, literally froze, some with their mouths open, others with their eyes locked on him as if afraid to blink. Eli's voice climbed effortlessly through the notes, full, controlled, heartbreakingly emotional. It wasn't just the strength of the sound, it was the meaning behind it. Every lyric carried pain, longing, resilience. He wasn't performing for applause, he was releasing something trapped deep inside him. At the 10-second mark, the front row was already standing. By 15 seconds, there were a few gasps of disbelief. By 20, someone yelled out, "Oh my God!" And at exactly the 30-second mark, the audience truly began losing control. Screams of support, cheers, cries. People were reacting with the kind of vulnerability only true talent could pull out of them. But Eli didn't notice any of it. His eyes stayed closed, his body still, letting the music move through him like every note was a confession he had held inside for years. His voice had a kind of purity that made people emotional without understanding why, a kind of resonance that felt lived in, a kind of magic that didn't just fill the room, it swallowed it. "Hit the golden buzzer!" Someone shouted from high in the balcony. Eli flinched at the sound, eyes opening mid-note. His voice wavered, not from weakness but from shock. A tear slipped down his cheek, catching the warm light and sparkling like a tiny star. The judges exchanged glances. Heidi looked ready to cry. Sofia was already wiping her eyes. Howie nodded in disbelief. But Simon looked like he had just discovered something completely new, something the world wasn't prepared for. The cameras zoomed in on Eli, his trembling hands, his glistening eyes, his chest rising and falling in steady but emotional breaths. This wasn't confidence. It wasn't control. It was surrender, total surrender to the moment. And when he reached the final line of his verse, the room seemed to dissolve around him. There was no crowd, no judges, no cameras. Just a 16-year-old boy singing as if he had been waiting his entire life to finally be heard. All it took was 5 seconds, for everyone watching, to know they were witnessing something extraordinary. Eli stood beneath the golden halo of the stage lights, his chest rising and falling with each breath as he slid into the next part of his song. The first verse had already shaken the room, but now the music began to build, slow at first, like a quiet heartbeat, then stronger, heavier, pulsing through every speaker in the arena. The audience leaned forward, drawn in, as if an invisible thread connected all of them to this one boy standing alone at center stage. Eli stepped closer to the mic, and then he opened his voice. It was different from the first verse, bigger, bolder, filled with a kind of aching power that didn't just hit the notes, it devoured them. His voice soared upward, echoing through the massive venue with the kind of emotional violence that made people feel like they were standing inside his memories. The crowd gasped. On the judges' panel, expressions shifted rapidly. Sofia's eyebrows shot up as if she'd just witnessed something impossible. Heidi placed a hand over her heart. Howie leaned forward with both elbows on the table, shaking his head in disbelief. But Simon, he didn't move. He didn't blink. He simply watched, eyes locked, breath steady, completely mesmerized. Eli's voice wove between soft vulnerability and explosive strength, the kind of dynamic only true artists possess. His tone cracked for a split second, not out of weakness but because of emotion. Real emotion, the sort that carries truth. That tiny crack sent a ripple through the room. A woman in the front row pressed a hand against her mouth. A couple near the side wiped tears away. Even one of the camera operators sniffed loudly enough for the boom mic to catch it. Eli didn't notice any of this. His eyes stayed closed, as if he was inside the world of his song, a world only he fully understood. He lifted the mic slightly closer. The chorus arrived. The moment he sang the first line, the stadium shook. His voice stretched impossibly long, like he was pulling light itself from the air and shaping it into sound. The high notes shimmered. The low notes rumbled. Every syllable carried a lifetime's worth of stories. Simon murmured something, barely audible, but the camera caught it. This kid is unreal. The music dipped for a breath, creating a small pocket of silence. Eli stepped back from the mic. The entire crowd held their breath. He inhaled slowly, deep, steady, almost ritualistic. Then he let the note go. It wasn't just a high note. It wasn't just a strong note. It was a moment, a long, impossibly clean, diamond-sharp note that sliced through the air with breathtaking precision. It rose higher and higher and higher, until it felt like the ceiling itself was vibrating. People shot to our feet. Sofia stood first, hands on her head. Heidi's mouth dropped open. Howie turned to the audience, gesturing wildly like he couldn't contain himself. And Simon froze. Not a flinch, not a blink. He simply stood up, slowly, eyes narrowed, full body angled forward like he had been pulled out of his seat by invisible force. The note continued, flawless, unwavering. It was the kind of vocal moment that becomes a clip replayed millions of times on social media. One of those remember where you were when moments. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Eli released the note and fell back into the melody, his chest heaving from the power he'd just unleashed. The music dipped to a whisper, his voice softened, turning fragile again, as though he'd poured out all his strength into that one spectacular moment. That contrast, strength followed by vulnerability, hit everyone hard. A teenage girl in the audience cried openly. A man in the back shouted, "What?" A group of fans near the front clutched each other's arms like they were watching a miracle unfold. The judges' reactions kept escalating. Sofia whispered, "He's glowing." Heidi nodded, eyes glassy. Howie mouthed, "Golden buzzer." But Simon still hadn't reacted verbally. Eli continued through the bridge, his voice carrying trembling emotion, his hands shaking as he held the mic. His eyes glimmered under the lights, reflecting a mixture of fear, hope, and disbelief that people were actually listening, really listening, to him. The beat fell away for one final time. Eli took one soft step forward, lifted his chin, and delivered the final line with a slow, painful, breathtaking softness. Then silence. Real silence. No rustling, no whispering, no movement. Just thousands of people frozen in time, processing what they had just heard. The music faded. The lights softened. Eli stared at the judges. Breath trembling. Face flushed. He didn't smile. He didn't cry yet. He simply waited, like a boy bracing for impact. A full second passed, then another. And then the audience exploded. Screams, cheers, thunderous applause that shook the entire auditorium. It was the kind of applause that wasn't simply loud, it was grateful. The kind of reaction people gave when they knew they had just witnessed something they would remember for the rest of their lives. Eli stumbled backward in shock, clutching the microphone tighter. Heidi stood, tears threatening. Sofia shouted something unintelligible, overwhelmed. Howie laughed in disbelief. But Simon remained still for a moment more, contemplating the boy in a way he rarely looked at anyone. Then he finally moved. He pushed his chair back, slowly, purposefully. The sound of the chair scraping echoed through the arena like a warning bell. The crowd went silent again. Eli's eyes widened, pupils shaking. The camera zoomed in on his face, capturing the exact moment confusion turned into hope. Simon stepped toward the edge of the judges' table. The audience waited. Eli waited. The entire world waited. This wasn't just an audition anymore. It was the moment before something life-changing. The room held its breath as Simon stood there, eyes fixed on Eli with a stare so intense it made the teenager's knees weaken. The applause died down, not because people wanted to stop cheering, but because they sensed something was about to happen. Something rare, something unforgettable. Eli clutched the microphone with trembling fingers. His heart pounded against his ribs so hard he could feel it in his throat. The golden confetti cannons loomed high above him like gates waiting to be opened, but he didn't dare assume. Not yet. Not when Simon Cowell, the hardest judge in the world to impress, stood there studying him like a mystery he needed to solve. Simon took a slow breath, then stepped forward once more. Each footstep echoed across the stage, sending a ripple through the audience. Eli's eyes followed every movement, unsure whether he should prepare for praise or criticism. When Simon reached the very edge of the judge's table, he placed both hands down firmly, leaning toward Eli. "Eli." His voice was calm, controlled, but there was something underneath it, something warm, something almost emotional. "When you walked onto this stage earlier, you looked terrified." A nervous ripple of laughter spread through the audience. Eli swallowed hard and nodded, unable to speak. Simon continued. "You reminded me of someone who had been overlooked his entire life, someone who never got the chance to be heard." Eli's throat tightened. He couldn't blink. He couldn't look away. "But the moment you opened your mouth," Simon said, his tone rising, "you proved every single one of us wrong about what we thought we saw." The audience erupted in cheers, but Simon raised a single hand. Instantly, the room fell silent again. Every eye in the studio was locked on him. "In the first 5 seconds of your song," Simon said slowly, "you did something I have never seen in all my years on this show." Eli's breath caught. Simon rarely, if ever, used words like that. "You made the entire world stop. You made me stop." The crowd gasped collectively, and Eli instinctively covered his mouth with one hand, overwhelmed already. Simon's voice softened. "Your voice. It's not just powerful, it's meaningful. It carries pain, truth, and purity that you cannot teach. You didn't sing to impress us. You sang to tell us something you've been holding inside. And Eli, we heard you." Eli blinked rapidly, his vision blurring with rising tears. This felt surreal, like a dream he was afraid to wake from. Simon glanced at the other judges. Heidi nodded instantly, her eyes glossy. Sofia placed her hand on her chest, mouthing, "Yes." Howie smiled wide, shaking his head as if still stunned. Then Simon turned back to Eli. "And because of that, I think there's only one thing left to do." The audience roared. People shot to their feet. The energy exploded so suddenly that Eli stumbled backward a step. Simon didn't rush. He didn't even walk straight to the buzzer. Instead, he did something even more shocking. He walked around the judge's desk. The audience gasped. Even the judges were taken aback. Simon rarely left his seat. Eli covered his face in disbelief as Simon approached him, step by step. The cameras followed, capturing every tremble, every breath, every moment of disbelief on Eli's young face. When Simon reached him, he stopped just a few feet away. Up close, Simon looked different, less like the sharp, critical judge, and more like someone who genuinely cared about the boy in front of him. "Eli," he said softly, "you have no idea how good you are. You have no idea what you just did to this room." Eli wiped his cheek, voice breaking. Thank you so much." Simon placed a hand on his shoulder. A small gesture, but one that spoke volumes. This moment, Simon whispered, "belongs to you." Then he turned. In slow motion, he walked back toward the golden buzzer. The crowd was screaming now, wild, deafening, uncontrollable. People held their phones high, desperate to capture the exact second history was about to happen. Eli stood frozen, one hand over his heart, the other clutching the microphone like he might fall if he let go. Simon reached the center of the judges' panel. He looked at his fellow judges, he looked at the audience, then he looked at Eli one last time, and finally, he slammed his hand onto the golden buzzer. The world erupted. A massive explosion of light shot across the stage. Golden confetti burst from the cannons above like a shimmering waterfall of stars. The music blasted triumphantly through the speakers, filling every corner of the studio. Eli collapsed to his knees, crying openly, completely overwhelmed. His small frame shuddered as the golden confetti rained down on him like the universe itself was blessing him. Heidi and Sofia rushed onto the stage without hesitation. Sofia wrapped her arms around Eli first, pulling him into a tight embrace. Heidi followed, smoothing his hair, whispering, "You deserve this, sweetheart. You deserve it." Howie applauded from the side, beaming proudly. And Simon walked onto the stage last. The crowd cheered louder as he approached. He stopped beside Eli, crouched down, and placed a reassuring hand on the boy's back. "You earned every second of this," Simon said quietly. Through tears, Eli managed to say the words he'd been holding inside. Thank you for giving me 5 seconds." Simon smiled, a real, rare, warm smile. "No, Eli, you gave us 5 seconds, and that was enough." The confetti continued to fall. The music swelled, the audience roared with love and disbelief, and in that moment, under the golden storm, surrounded by judges, cameras, and the entire world watching, Eli Navarro's life changed forever. 5 seconds had turned a frightened teenager into a star.